It's never too early to get in the holiday spirit. And what better way to do that than with one of the best a cappella groups out there? Please welcome Pentatonix.
What if I told you that the highest note in pop wasn't sung by Mariah, but by a kid from Baptist, Texas, who refused to sing like a man? That's the thing about Mitch Grassi. With the 1B7 whistle note, he once flipped a Friday night football world into stunned silence. But behind the glory of that note was a world of epic record betrayal, a hidden solo alter ego called Messer, and a battle to keep Pentatonix alive while fighting for a voice that refused to get lower just to fit the brand. It's time to tell you everything about Pentatonix and how Mitch Grassi nearly lost it all. Before Pentatonix was a global brand, it was 3 Texas kids with a dream and a deadline. But how did a frantic day turn into a 5-person revolution overnight? 24-hour alchemy. You know that feeling when something just clicks so perfectly it almost feels like it shouldn't be allowed to happen? That's what went down the day Pentatonix became Pentatonix. It was messy, frantic, and somehow perfect, all in the same 24 hours. And Mitch Grassi? He was right in the middle of it, carrying a 5-octave range that could crack open a room and still make it feel like a whisper. Mitch told fans, "It's time to tell you everything about Pentatonix, so let's roll back to the day that changed everything." It started in Arlington, Texas, where the Fridays were made for football and kids were expected to sing low and strong, never high and soft. But Mitch and his childhood friends Scott Hoying and Kirsten Maldonado didn't really care about fitting in. They had this idea that they could do a cover of Lady Gaga's Telephone, but they needed a sound that felt bigger than the 3 of them standing in a living room with a camera pointed at a cracked iPhone screen. Scott found out about NBC's The Sing Off and decided they were going to audition. The problem was that the rules said they needed at least 5 people, and it was already the day before the submission was due. Imagine being 19, in a town that wants you to keep your dreams small, and you suddenly need to find 2 more people to turn a goofy high school cover squad into a group that could take on national TV. The urgency was real. Kevin Olusala came into the picture because of a YouTube video where he played the cello and beatboxed at the same time, a clip that felt like it was from another planet for 3 kids who barely had gas money to get to rehearsal. Avi Kaplan, the bass, showed up because they needed someone who could hit the floor with his voice while Mitch was floating in the clouds with his high notes. It wasn't some long, magical summer of bonding and preparation. It was a single day, a handful of calls, and a choice to just go for it. You can almost picture the scene. Scott pacing in a bedroom, Kirsten trying to organize sheet music, Mitch practicing whistle notes that made the dog next door start howling, and Kevin and Avi walking in with barely enough time to say hello before pressing record. They didn't know each other. They didn't know how it would sound. They just knew it was now or never. That last-minute chaos somehow became the glue that locked their voices together, and it turned what could have been a shaky, unpolished audition into something that felt raw and alive. Was their last-minute chemistry the real reason Epic Records signed them so fast, seeing something that felt too alive to ignore? It's worth asking, because sometimes the best things come from having no time to second-guess yourself. They needed a name, and Scott found inspiration in the pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note musical scale used around the world. It made sense for a 5-person group, but they added an X at the end to give it a bit of edge. Pentatonix with an X felt like a small rebellion, like a nod to the fact that they weren't planning to fit into the usual boxes that the music industry expected them to check. And when they hit that stage on the sing-off, it was clear that something was happening. Mitch's voice didn't get lower to fit the brand, Kevin's beatboxing brought a new kind of rhythm, Avi's bass grounded them, and Scott and Kirsten added layers that turned every song into a miniature story. The crowd felt it, the judges felt it, and for kids who had grown up in the 2000s and the 1980s, where a cappella was more of a choir rehearsal thing than a ticket to stardom, seeing Pentatonix on national TV felt like watching a glitch in the system, but in the best way. They won the sing-off, and for a moment, it felt like the hard part was over. But winning was only the start. Imagine thinking you've made it, thinking that everything is about to fall into place, only to have Epic Records, the label that was supposed to help you launch, drop you just 3 weeks later. It felt like a gut punch to a group that had just begun to believe they could break through. It left Mitch standing there with a voice that could soar across stadiums, wondering if it was all about to disappear. But before we get to that heartbreak, I want to know from you, have you ever had a last-minute win, the kind that happened because you didn't have time to overthink and it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened? Winning the sing-off was huge for them, yes. But why did Epic dump them 3 weeks later? And how did Pentatonix claw their way back without a label, using the only tools they had and a YouTube platform? You know that moment when you think you've made it and everything you fought for is finally real? That's where Pentatonix stood, fresh off the glow of the sing-off victory, cash prize in hand, families cheering back home in Texas, and a whole internet waiting to see what they would do next. It felt like the world had cracked open for them. They won, and they were supposed to get a major label debut. This was the moment Mitch Grassi could finally show the world the power of a voice that refused to drop lower just to fit in. But then, 3 weeks later, it was over. Epic Records, the label that was supposed to launch them, dropped Pentatonix before they even recorded a single album. No studio time, no radio deals, just a polite email and a phone call that cut them loose before they had even taken a breath. You can almost see it. Mitch sitting with Scott and Kirsten, refreshing their inboxes, waiting for that call sheet telling them what to record, what shows they would headline, and which stages they would finally step on as professionals. Instead, they got silence, and it felt like the dream was over before it even started. You might wonder, why would a label walk away from a freshly minted TV champion with a built-in audience and a viral moment behind them? The industry was shifting, and a cappella wasn't a bet Epic wanted to place real money on. A cappella was still seen as a novelty, something you'd catch in a college quad or on a Christmas special, not something you'd see topping charts or selling out tours. And Pentatonix? They were 5 kids without a band, a label, or any path forward except the one they were willing to carve for themselves. Mitch Grassi told fans, "It's time to tell you everything about Pentatonix." And here's what most people never knew about this moment. The win didn't define them. It was the loss. They had a choice. They could walk away, go back to college, pick up normal lives, or they could do the scariest thing imaginable in the early 2000s when YouTube was still a place for cat videos and low-res vlogs shot on cracked webcams. They could try to build something themselves, and that's exactly what they did. Scott, Kirsten, Mitch, Avi, and Kevin pooled their sing-off cash prize and decided to record their own videos. No label to guide them, no fancy studio, just a camera, a white wall, and a vision. Their first videos were raw and stripped down with tight harmonies and arrangements that felt bigger than any 5 voices should have sounded. Mitch's high notes were there, unfiltered, with no label executive telling him to sing lower for radio friendliness, and Kevin's beatboxing gave it a rhythm that felt alive. Within weeks, the subscriber count started to tick upwards. A few hundred, then a few thousand, and then a few 100,000. One of their first viral moments came from a cover of Somebody That I Used to Know. It exploded, pulling in viewers who had never heard a cappella like this before. They weren't just harmonizing for the sake of it. They were reimagining pop songs and giving them a layered complexity that felt cinematic, almost like you were hearing a song again for the first time. YouTube became their stage, and they learned to edit, film, record, and post with the kind of discipline you don't learn in a label office. Mitch, who had once wondered if the world would ever accept a male voice that could hit notes most singers only dream about, found that there was an audience hungry for exactly that. The channel's early growth wasn't a fluke. It was a sign that the world was changing, and Pentatonix was ready to ride that wave. A dramatized text bubble would pop here. What do we post next? Do we even have enough for rent this month? Did you see the new subscriber count today? Because this wasn't some polished rollout by a major label. It was 5 young artists working out of apartments, editing until sunrise, uploading videos, and refreshing the page to watch views climb in real time, learning as they went. They were making arrangements, shooting, editing, and posting, repeating the process over and over, week after week, refusing to let the label's rejection be the final word on their story. Pentatonix's gamble paid off. Their YouTube channel grew to over 5 million subscribers before they even landed their first Grammy. Their videos pulled millions of views, and their fans became the marketing team they didn't have, sharing covers, making reaction videos, and showing up to live shows that started small but grew city by city, country by country. This wasn't Epic Records' plan for them, but it became the plan Pentatonix wrote for themselves. And that's the power of the pivot. When the gatekeepers say no, you find another way in, and sometimes you realize you didn't need their gates in the first place. So next, cue the high note that would rewrite Grammy history. Because coming up, we're diving into how Pentatonix turned viral covers into award-winning albums, how Mitch Grassi's voice broke the rules of what pop music could sound like, and how the group went from YouTube hopefuls to Grammy winners, proving that sometimes the best way to win the game is to play it on your own terms. Have you ever heard a note so high that you had to check if your speakers were glitching? Or catch yourself rewinding just to be sure a human being actually made that sound? That's what it's like the first time you really hear Mitch Grassi. Because while the world was busy labeling Pentatonix as that a cappella group from TV, Mitch was quietly bending the rules of pop vocals one whistle note at a time. And Mitch told fans, "It's time to tell you everything about Pentatonix." So, let's talk about the voice that turned a cappella from a side stage gimmick into a chart-topping revolution. Mitch's voice isn't just high. It's stratospheric. Documented as reaching from F-sharp 2 all the way up to AB7, his range covers 5 octaves, which puts him in rare company, right up there with Mariah Carey's whistle tones and Freddie Mercury's operatic belts. You can imagine an on-screen piano roll here, each note lighting up as Mitch climbs higher and higher, ending with AB7 that feels more like glass shattering than a sound you'd expect from a guy who grew up in a Texas world that told him boys were meant to sing low. And here's the thing most people don't realize. Mitch didn't just hit those notes for show. He turned them into weapons that fueled Pentatonix's rise to the mainstream. Their Daft Punk medley pulled over 324 million views, with Mitch layering impossibly high harmonies that lifted the song from a cover to a sonic spectacle. That video alone helped Pentatonix win their first Grammy for Best Arrangement, Instrumental, or a Cappella in 2015. Then there was the dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, another Grammy-winning performance, where Mitch's whistle register blended with Kevin's beatboxing in a way that felt like watching a high-wire act, except the rope was invisible and the fall was a missed note you never heard. And if you want to see how that voice holds up against legends, you only need to check out their collaboration with Dolly Parton on Jolene. That performance, raw and live, won Pentatonix their third Grammy, showing that a cappella could hold its own on a stage dominated by polished pop productions. Mitch's high notes weren't just talent. They were a strategy, and here's the fun part. Mitch once revealed his technique to sustain those glass-shattering highs. He calls it the vowel shift SpongeBob technique. Yeah, you heard that right. He shifts his vowel placement in his mouth, almost like flipping a switch, to get a brighter, thinner tone that lets him slide up to those whistle notes without forcing or straining. It's the kind of inside detail that explains why you can try to mimic him in the shower and still end up cracking halfway through AC sharp 5, while Mitch sounds like he's just getting started. Speaking of that C sharp 5, here's a challenge for you. Try it. Record yourself hitting that note, post it, and tag this channel. Because let's see how many of you can even get close to what Mitch can do without popping a vocal cord in the process. What's wild is that these Grammy wins weren't a fluke or a one-time viral moment. They were proof that Pentatonix had cracked the code of what a cappella could be. For decades, a cappella was stuck in the realm of barbershop quartets or college groups, something you'd catch during a campus event in the 1980s. But when Mitch layered those high notes with Kevin's percussion and Avi's bass, it wasn't just another performance. It was a recalibration of what the human voice could do, how it could blend, clash, and build tension without needing a single instrument to back it up. Their videos on YouTube, filmed in hallways and living rooms and against blank walls, became their record label. Each upload was a release, and each release was a test, Would people listen to an arrangement of evolution of music that spanned centuries in a single video? Over 100 million views later, the answer was clear. And Mitch's voice was the constant thread pulling these experiments together. His countertenor wasn't a gimmick, it was the backbone of the group's sound. It allowed Pentatonix to take risks, cover songs you'd never expect to work a cappella, and pull in an audience that didn't even know they wanted to hear a group with no instruments dominate pop covers. When they stood on the Grammy stage accepting those awards, it wasn't just for Pentatonix. It was for every kid who grew up being told to sing lower, sound more normal, and fit in. Mitch Grassi's high notes became a statement, a reminder that the voice doesn't have to follow the rules, and sometimes breaking them is exactly what gets you noticed. And here's the kicker. Mitch's voice was only half the revolution, because while the high notes were winning Grammys, he was quietly flipping the entire conversation around masculinity, identity, and what it means to show up exactly as you are in an industry that loves to put you in boxes.